Welcome to the county seat. I'm your host, Chad Booth. Today we are going to talk about something that has been a topic of conversation for almost 10 years. It is called Medicaid expansion. It comes as part of the Obamacare legacy that was passed in 2011. And ever since that time, there have been controversies here in the state over whether we should participate in Medicaid expansion, which is part of the entire bill. With Medicaid expansion, it helps people that are basically at a percentage of poverty level get medical coverage through the federally subsidized health care system. States had to pay part of it. We're going to cover how we got from that point to where we got to Proposition 3 and from where we are today with the bill to modify it. Let's start with the basics of the history.
Medicaid was signed into law in 1965 as part of President Johnson's Great Society effort. It provided insurance for people of all ages who did not have enough income or resources to pay for health care. States were not required to provide Medicaid, but all 50 of them eventually chose to do so. Medicaid was a direct benefit plan originally, which means medical bills were accrued by qualified individuals and the government would pay for the care directly. In the 1980s, there was a debate about the efficiency and waste of the government program and an attempt to privatize the Medicaid system, which led many states to get waivers from the federal government to create Medicaid managed care programs. These programs allowed states to use their funds to enroll eligible people into private health plans. That became the status quo for most states, including Utah. Then came the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act, or Obamacare as it has been nicknamed, which passed and was signed into law in 2010. This law originally required states to expand Medicaid to cover all people making up to 133% of the officially recognized poverty level, not just categorized groups, as had been defined in the past. In exchange for states expanding coverage, the federal government would increase their share of the cost to 100%. A gradual decrease would then occur each year from 2014 to 2019, eventually sitting at the permanent level of 90% federal coverage and 10% state. Many states were opposed to this additional burden on a plan that they had already paid a significant portion of, and even at 10%, legislatures in many less affluent states, along with more conservative ones, were opposed to the idea of being mandated to provide coverage. This led to a Supreme Court challenge and a ruling that made it clear that states could not be forced to provide the program under threat of a loss of existing federal dollars for their current plans. In Utah, there were factions that argued the state should participate in the program because Utahns were paying into the system anyway, whether the state was getting money or not. Other factions were concerned that, as the law was structured, the federal government could choose to change the terms, or worse, be unable to pay for the program. Utah's governor sought a compromise waiver that would allow Utah to manage the program with modifications, but he could not get the support of the fiscally focused legislature or the federal government, which left the state in a Medicaid stalemate. Last year, voters took the issue into their own hands and gathered enough signatures to put a petition on the ballot to expand Medicaid with Proposition 3, which passed by a 12% margin.
The proposition that we got was not perfect. It had loopholes in it. It had problems with it that we couldn't solve otherwise. We put a bill together that solved those problems. One of the largest problems, of course, was the funding. There was only enough for less than 1 year, and then we started to go in the red. We have to balance our budget. I can't take a $100 million deficit and just turn it around and find the money. People say, well, there's plenty of money in the budget. I spend more money than any other budget in the state, including public education, $6 billion. So it's not like I'm being tight-fisted with the money. It has to go to the places that need it the most. One state that I can think of, Michigan, had a $1.2 billion deficit in their budget. Was more than what they had planned on, and it cost them a ton. We can't do that in Utah. We gave expansion. We covered everybody, some with insurance, some with Medicaid. They all have that option. And we did it in a financially stable way. So for long term, we can actually afford it. Otherwise, Somebody is going to go without Medicaid when the whole program implodes. Now that we have it expanded, we have it on the correct track that it can last long term at a reasonable expense.
So what impacts will this new law have on counties and their healthcare systems? We will explore that question when we return. For the County Seat, I'm Maggie Kay.
Now that you're up to speed, we're going to take a break. Get your notepads out, get your pencils ready, and we'll come back with our conversation about where we go from here on the County Seat.
My daughter and I had just finished a run at this place called Eagle Point. It's this really cool but kind of challenging ski resort that has a real family feel to it. She was so excited because she beat me down the run. Deja vu. I saw myself as a kid out skiing my mom. It was a big moment for me. And all of a sudden it hit me. I was making the same memories for her.
Beaver County, Utah. Make it more than a vacation.
There's a little place on a Utah map where I was raised, where my heart's at, where the sagebrush grows wild and high, and the stars come out at night. Oh, there ain't nothing like being raised in the basin with a Ute reservation, skiing starvation, that Duchesne County life.
All the traveling that I've done over the world, I'd still rate this locale as being one of the best.
This is some of the most scenic country out there. And part of the appeal for Kanab is it's a small town. It's beautiful. People are very friendly.
It's just been awe-inspiring.
You just couldn't find a nicer place to come.
Welcome back to the County Seat. We're having a conversation today about Medicaid expansion. The fact that it is passed in Proposition 3 has been modified by the Utah State Legislature. It's under consideration right now with some tweaks, as the legislators are calling it. Joining us for a conversation about the impacts it has on county government is from Tooele County, their sheriff, Paul Wimmer, and representing behavioral health in Davis County, Brandon Hatch. Guys, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. I'm going to start because, Paul, we've had this conversation and your predecessor about the RJI, the reinvestment, JRI, I get it backwards, another acronym, and funding that was really reliant upon Medicaid expansion that hasn't happened to this point. How important is this to move forward for you and law enforcement?
It has the potential to impact recidivism significantly, because if an inmate comes in and they receive medical and mental health care from any given facility, jail, what do they do when they get released? And often they're not released with a job, they don't have insurance, and how do they maintain a similar level of treatment or medicine that they were used to in the facility? And so often they end up reverting back to their old habits, and which is what got them booked into jail in the first place. And so we think that the ability for them to receive ongoing treatment could impact the recidivism rate in jails.
What kind of impact has it had on the mental health picture in a broader perspective? Have you guys really been crippled since the whole law changed back in 2011?
Well, we have a number of individuals, especially in the county system, who come to us who are uninsured or underinsured, and how do you treat them? How do you fund treatment for that population that comes out of the jail with some medications or some treatment that's has begun there, and how do you continue that on without funding? And so Medicaid expansion really does allow us to start treating more of those individuals who not only we're seeing that are unfunded or underinsured, but also those that aren't seeking help at all because they don't think they can pay for it. So an expansion of some kind is going to really benefit a lot of people and help us provide opportunities for treatment for 100,000 individuals moving forward.
I remember the Salt Lake County Sheriff told me a few years ago that his basically narcotics bill, or his drug bill to treat patients, exceeded $80,000 a month. I mean, you're what, a Class 2 county, you're right close behind Salt Lake. Is that a realistic figure to think that a jail is approaching that kind of cost to run its operation and keep people healthy?
Well, I think so, probably between the substance use treatment component of that, the treatment side, and the physical health side. I mean, a lot of those individuals are coming in with some poor physical health, and yeah, I could see the costs going pretty high.
It doesn't surprise me a bit. The facility, the size of Salt Lake County's facility, $80,000 is probably fairly typical cost.
So in the past, in this interim period, where's the funding come from to treat patients that are involved in this? I mean, where have we, how are you paying for it before this? I mean, from 2011 to today, do you budget for it without a county budget? Does the state set aside money? Is there any federal money? How do you do it?
It's on the county's dime. It's county taxpayer that's funding our pharmaceutical bill, our care in our facility.
Does that work the same for contracting for mental health?
We get some state general funds in order to provide treatment for the uninsured, underinsured population, and but as well as counties, and those counties that can, and not all can, but those that can pay a little bit more are able to provide some of those services in the jail. For us in Davis County, we have our county is a great partner. We get some state funds. It's probably just not enough to do the extended amount of care that's needed.
So with what's being considered right now, are we actually going to see some of that burden that the county is currently picking up to handle medications across the board? If they're on Medicaid and they go to jail, does the coverage they have in Medicaid carry over into jail treatment, or are they cut off as soon as they go into jail like private insurance carriers?
Typically they get cut off when they become incarcerated. We'd certainly love to see a provision within the bill that would allow them to continue to be insured, because that would help out a great deal in providing the care to them while they're incarcerated.
So this may not be a fair question for you, but we've been involved in this conversation in the past. When JRI was passed, Eric Hutchins was counting on that Healthy Utah initiative to help fund a lot of what he was trying to accomplish, and so he was looking for Medicaid expansion at that point to try and make this happen. And he said, if I don't, I've got a pool to tap, and I think that's how come it's been underfunded to this point. How did that all come together? If you're not getting it now and you're not going to get it under Medicaid expansion, did that really solve a problem, or will it really solve a problem, or only after they're released?
Well, the JRI was designed to send them down a pathway of treatment, and while we do have a mental health provider that comes in and provides some services within the facility, where we really fail them is upon release. And so, yes, there's still benefit to be had from the expansion in that we can provide them resources upon their release that hopefully they will take advantage of through the Medicaid expansion.
And I agree. And JRI, the purpose was to identify high and low risk offenders before they go into jail, and while they're in jail, and when they come out, be able to provide some treatment, and that is happening. Really, what would benefit jails, the Accountable Care Act has a provision in it that allows for Medicaid enrollment 30 days before release from the jail. But it's going to have to take some kind of a bill, a state-sponsored bill, in order to get that enacted in Utah. So we need a legislator to write a bill requesting those funds through the ACA.
And that doesn't exist in the tweaks they're making to Prop 3 at this point?
It doesn't.
All right, that's a conversation to take up right after this break. We'll be back with the county seat. We'll continue our conversation in just a minute.
There are meetings, and then there are gatherings. At the Davis Conference Center, we know the difference. Turn your event into something more than just another business summit. With over 70,000 square feet of flexible meeting space, state-of-the-art presentation amenities, and inspiring architecture, the Davis Conference Center is designed to deliver stellar results in a majestic setting. Take your convention to the next level. Schedule now at davisconferencecenter.com.
Years in the making, dinosaurs once roamed this land. Now they're found at the Dinosaur National Monument. Let's take you beyond the bones. We call it Dinosaur Land. You'll find it offers adventures and sights not seen anywhere else in the world. Come to Dinosaur Land, Vernal, Utah. You'll want to stay forever. The dinosaurs did.
In a place that is beyond words, there is nothing to be said, except take your time in Bryce Canyon country.
Welcome back to the county seat. Good thing you're back, because this conversation almost took off without you. So let's get back to what we were talking about. What was the promise of JRI, and how's this going to help, Paul?
Well, the promise was that we needed to provide some sort of treatment for those that suffer from addiction and mental illness. And so as part of that, we would screen inmates as they come in, and that was supposed to direct us in what pathway to send down that particular person so that they could benefit from the assessment. The problem was it wasn't funded, to where the pathway never got built. So we would do these assessments, no one would ever get them, and so they were not put on a pathway because there really wasn't a pathway, because there was no funding to fund them pathways, which were treatment.
So basically they got released to a courtyard and wandered around till they've come back in?
Yes.
Okay. You had a thought that I also stopped you on.
No, I think that one of the things that concerns us as county providers is with Medicaid expansion, they're looking for a way to pay for the match, the federal match piece of it, in order to draw those dollars down. Well, in order to do that, they have to find funding somewhere. JRI funds are some of those funds that are being discussed right now, and so even the removal of some of those funds to help pay for Medicaid expansion. So if JRI funds are removed, or if the Division of Substance Use and Mental Health chooses to take away those funds and gives it back to the state to pay for match, those of us that are providing services in the jail using JRI funds have no way of providing treatment any longer.
So basically, Medicaid expansion could actually hurt where we were headed down the path of rehabilitating people and getting them on a correct path and cutting recidivism, right? I mean, am I saying that correctly? You're not talking.
It could help. It could hurt in the jails, honestly. Those funds that we use for criminal justice purposes being taken out of some of the jails, or being able to provide those services, because Medicaid dollars aren't going to be coming into the jail. So where are we using those funds currently to provide those services? And a lot of it comes from JRI.
So if the state legislator hadn't come back in to tweak Proposition 3, what would have happened? You don't know, huh?
I don't know.
I don't think anything would have changed with the jail. I think the full Medicaid expansion up to 138% of federal poverty would have stayed the same. The question is that match piece, because what's being proposed now is a 70-30 match, 70% of the funding coming from the federal government, county matches 30%. That's the bridge plan that's in place now. But if with full Medicaid expansion, that would have been a 90-10 split, more people covered, costing a little bit less.
I'm going to take one more break. When we come back, I want to talk about the fairness of this all, because there's an issue that's always been on the table since this whole thing started, and it probably could use a little light of day in this conversation. We'll be right back with the county seat.
All local products have a story of magical places, real people, and delicious recipes spanning generations. So go ahead and discover flavors you've never tasted and friends you never knew you had. Utah's own Discover Local Food.
In our world, the sun shines on high adventure, and new experiences are yours for the taking. And everything in you looking to play outside the box. Cedar City, it's time to play.
Utah has a national treasure where winding canyons stretch to the horizon, where nature forms elegant structures, and where iconic monuments of the West stand tall. Visitors around the world come to get a glimpse of southern Utah's legendary landscape and landmarks. Join them and explore San Juan County, Utah's Canyon Country.
The Utah Farm Bureau began as a collection of farmers supporting each other to raise the food we enjoy. Today, Farm Bureau membership encompasses everyone, whether ranchers, growers, or just everyday folks like you and me. Members enjoy discounts on items like vehicles and ATVs, or insurance that's very affordable. You don't have to be a farmer to join, and dues are small, but together we make a big difference in keeping our food supply local and abundant. Join Utah Farm Bureau.
Welcome back to County Seat. We're discussing the impact Medicaid expansion may potentially have on the counties, particularly in jails and mental health. So I do want to come back and address a question, because people sitting at home, they're going to go, I remember something about this when it all happened. Aren't we paying tax dollars to go into this system already? And because we did not do Medicaid expansion, we've been shortchanging ourselves for this 90% that is supposedly in that match. What say you guys about that?
Well, the funding is going somewhere. It's going back to the federal government. It has been since the ACA passed, and it's being held there, I guess. I don't know what they're doing with it, with the money now, but yeah, so Utahns have been sending their tax dollars back for this purpose for years.
So is the state right, or are they in a position to be concerned about the fact that, yeah, sure, it's 90-10 right now, and we can probably cover that and find a way to make our match, but it may change in the future. It may end up being 70-30. It may end up being 50-50. And if you listen to some people, they might say, well, the government's going to go broke anyway, and then we'll have to pay for all of it. So is that a fair and legitimate concern for them to try and fine-tune this, or should we just be taking the whole match?
Well, I think it's the responsible thing to do to take a look at it. citizens clearly passed Medicaid expansion, but there's a funding concern, right? I think once it passed, then they started looking at the numbers and realized that there's not enough funding to pay for that full Medicaid expansion. Let's take a look at some other options. And so that's a hard question. I'm not sure how they do it or what the right answer is. I tend to lean toward if the citizens want it, we should find a way to get it.
I do think that is a legitimate concern. It just is very typical within government for larger government to initiate and start a program by funding it properly and then backing off of it, leaving the funding mechanism to be determined by the lower level of government, whether it's from federal to state or state to county. We experience that.
What's your inmate population look like? What do you float about for Tooele County?
I have about 225 inmates in my jail right now. Half of them are contract.
Okay, so you're trying to get 220 people on a right path. Are you worried that what money you do have coming in JRA, which is not enough, might be taken away?
We're always worried about any funding mechanism that diminishes, goes away. It's always a concern, and it's very common for that to happen. So I can see why the legislature is very concerned about this not being fully funded in the long term.
Not wanting to be a scare tactic guy, but I'm going to ask both of you from your different perspectives the same question. If the funding stops, how do you change the way the jail operates? You just turn people out?
I don't want to do that. That's been one thing I've been able to do, and we've had the capacity to do so, is to not turn away. We have enough beds for our population, and it would be very painful for me to start turning away regardless of the reason.
And what about your program? I mean, if the funding stopped, what would your option be?
We feel like we've been doing this anyway for a number of years, and county behavioral health finds a way. And we haven't had a good funding system in place for a long time. So if funding went away, we would still find a way to be able to serve them. It wouldn't be easier, maybe reduce number of services available to them, or expanding how much a citizen might have to pay in order to get those services, but we would find a way.
Gentlemen, thank you for your time. It's been a good conversation. Seems like there should be a little bit more, but maybe the bill needs to advance for a couple of weeks. We might come back and visit it again. Thank you very much for joining us. Remember, local government is where your life happens. Be involved, be part of the solution, and we'll look for you next week on the county seat.